You think AI-driven drones in battlefield surveillance are just smarter cameras in the sky, just another piece of military tech for experts to argue about. But that's too soft, too shallow, too comfortable. What you're really looking at is the industrialization of awareness, and if you don't understand that, you don't understand where power is going. You think war is won by force alone, by bigger explosions, louder threats, and stronger men charging forward, but force without sight is waste. Force without awareness is panic with a budget. And the side that sees first, tracks longer, predicts faster, and adapts sooner does not just gain an advantage. It changes the meaning of advantage itself. If you need reminders like that, subscribe now, because you do not need more comforting commentary. You need the truth repeated until your mind stops running back to fantasy. You need clarity when the world keeps dressing transformation up like a gadget review. You need someone to tell you that what looks like new equipment is often a new philosophy of power. Here's what it really means. AI-driven drones in battlefield surveillance are not mainly about flying machines. They are about persistent vision. They are about compressing uncertainty. They are about turning the fog of war into a data stream and then weaponizing the speed at which that data becomes action. That is the real shift. Not just flight, not just cameras, not just automation. Decision dominance. Most people miss that because they are trapped in the oldest misconception of all. They think the battle is still mainly about who can hit harder. They think surveillance is secondary, passive, boring, supportive. They hear the word drone and imagine some distant aircraft circling overhead like a mechanical bird. They hear AI and imagine a flashy software layer slapped onto hardware so marketers and commentators can feel futuristic. They think the machine watches, reports, and waits. No, that's outdated thinking. The hard truth is this. Once AI-driven surveillance becomes effective, seeing is no longer passive. Seeing becomes shaping. The machine doesn't just observe the battlefield. It changes the tempo of the battlefield. It reduces the time between detection and decision. It tracks patterns humans miss. It notices movement, anomalies, heat, timing, routes, habits, signatures, and weak points at a scale no exhausted soldier, no overwhelmed analyst, no distracted command room can match consistently. And when that awareness starts feeding targeting, maneuver, logistics, defense, deception detection, and prediction, the side with better surveillance is no longer just informed. It is inside the opponent's nervous system. That's called asymmetry through awareness, and you need to sit with that because weak minds keep treating awareness like background noise. But awareness is never background. Awareness is the frame. Awareness tells force where to go, when to hold, when to move, when to hide, when to fake, when to strike, and when not to waste blood proving a point to your own ego. If you cannot see clearly, you do not own your power. You are renting it from luck. Why does this happen? Why are AI-driven drones becoming so central in battlefield surveillance? Because modern conflict is too fast, too dense, too information-heavy for raw human processing alone. Because there is too much movement, too much terrain, too much signal, too much clutter, too much deception, too much pressure. Because human attention is precious, finite, emotional, and fragile under stress. Because commanders want fewer blind spots, fewer surprises, fewer wasted assets, fewer dead men caused by late recognition. And because every serious actor understands the same brutal truth, the side that closes the gap between sensing and acting can make the other side feel slow even when it is not weak. That is the root cause. Not technology for its own sake. Pressure, compression. The demand to turn chaos into readable structure faster than the enemy can. And this is where your old beliefs start collapsing. You were taught to respect visible strength. Tanks, missiles, jets, numbers, noise, hardware that looks powerful on camera. But AI-driven surveillance shifts the center of gravity toward invisible superiority. Pattern recognition, persistence, classification, tracking, anticipation. It rewards the side that can stay present longer than a human eyelid, more patient than a human nervous system, more consistent than a tired mind at 3 a.m. after 12 hours of threat monitoring. Presence versus drift. Signal versus noise. Reality versus fantasy. That is the real contest. And let's go deeper, because most people stop thinking the moment a subject becomes technical. That is intellectual cowardice. They say, I'm not a military expert. They say, this is too advanced. They say, it's just defense stuff. No, you don't need to be a pilot or an analyst to understand the principle. The principle is ancient. The tools are new. Whoever sees the field clearly controls the terms of engagement. Whoever sees badly lives inside reaction. That's true in war. It's true in business. It's true in leadership. It's true in your own life. The machine in the sky is just exposing a law you should have learned years ago. If you do not actively manage awareness, you surrender initiative. That's called passive defeat. And it happens long before anyone admits they're losing. Now understand the cost. The use of AI-driven drones in battlefield surveillance does not only increase efficiency, it changes what it feels like to be hunted. That matters. It changes what it feels like to move, to hide, to regroup, to transport, to communicate, to exist under observation. It puts pressure on routine. It punishes predictability. It makes concealment harder and mistakes more expensive. It wears down confidence because the enemy may not just see where you are. It may see how you behave, when you move, how often, along which path, under what weather, after which signal, with what support, around what pattern. That is not just information. That is behavioral exposure. And behavioral exposure is humiliating. Why? Because it tells you that the thing you thought was private was actually a pattern. The thing you thought was spontaneous was actually readable. The thing you thought was safe because it was familiar was safe only because nobody had the persistence to study it long enough. That's how complacency dies. And it should die. Because complacency is one of the most expensive addictions a man, a team, or a nation can have. Complacency says, we've always done it this way. Complacency says, they probably won't notice. Complacency says, good enough. Complacency says, we can fix it later. Then later arrives with consequences. This is why AI-driven surveillance is so unsettling to people who still worship old images of strength. It forces an uncomfortable admission. Being powerful is not enough. Being brave is not enough. Being armed is not enough. If your habits are readable, if your movement is predictable, if your command cycle is slow, if your deception is weak, if your awareness is fractured, then all your visible strength becomes easier to map, monitor, and exploit. That's called exposed force. A lot of men live like that, by the way. Big talk. Visible confidence, no internal discipline, no pattern control, no strategic restraint, no silence, no boundaries, no self-study, just energy without structure. Then they wonder why life keeps reading them so easily. War punishes that. Reality punishes that. Technology just punishes it faster. And let's deal with another fantasy. Some people hear AI-driven drones and immediately assume this means perfect omniscience, like some all-seeing machine has replaced uncertainty forever. That's childish too. AI is not magic. Drones are not gods. Sensors fail. Data can be spoofed. Weather interferes. Terrain hides. Camouflage adapts. Electronic warfare disrupts. Bias enters systems. Humans still misinterpret outputs. Decision-makers still hesitate, overreact, or trust the wrong signal. So no, the lesson is not technology solves everything. The lesson is sharper than that. Technology amplifies the quality of the system it serves. If the people using it are disciplined, trained, skeptical, grounded, and clear-eyed, it becomes force multiplication. If the people using it are arrogant, lazy, distracted, or intoxicated by novelty, it becomes expensive self-deception. That's called amplified character. And that should hit you hard, because that principle applies to your own life with embarrassing precision. More tools will not save you if your mind is sloppy. More access will not save you if your habits are weak. More information will not save you if you cannot interpret, prioritize, and act with discipline. AI does not rescue the undisciplined, it exposes them. So what's the reframe? Stop seeing AI-driven drones as merely machines replacing men. Start seeing them as instruments that reward clarity, punish predictability, and elevate the value of disciplined perception. The real battle is not man versus machine. It is disciplined systems versus slow, sentimental, outdated thinking. It is a test of who can remain accurate under pressure, who can see without flinching, who can adapt without ego, who can protect function instead of performing strength. Now picture the man who understands this, not the boy impressed by the buzzwords, not the coward panicking about the future, not the loud fraud acting like every new tool makes human character irrelevant. The man, the one who embodies the solution. He is calm when others are theatrical. He respects capability more than image. He understands that awareness is a discipline, not a mood. He does not confuse surveillance with paranoia or precision with fear. He knows where to look, what to ignore, when to act, when to wait. He has boundaries, which means he does not let endless noise colonize his attention. He has purpose, which means he does not gather information to feel intelligent. He gathers it to orient action. He is grounded, which means he is not hypnotized by novelty. He evaluates it, tests it, integrates it if it serves reality, rejects it if it serves fantasy. He has self-respect, which means he does not outsource judgment to hype, panic, or public opinion. He is difficult to deceive because he does not need emotional comfort from the picture in front of him. He can handle complexity, he can handle ambiguity, he can handle delayed certainty without becoming weak, dramatic, or reckless. When others are desperate for immediate answers, he stays with the process. He sees that the real power is not just collecting more data, it is staying coherent while the data keeps changing. That's the man. And if you want to become more like him, stop glamorizing reaction. Reaction is easy. Any fool can be startled. Any fool can rage. Any fool can look at a machine and either worship it or fear it. Maturity is harder. Maturity says, what is the principle underneath this? Maturity says, how does this change behavior? Maturity says, what new discipline is now required? Maturity does not ask, How do I feel about this? First, it asks, what is true here? That's called command presence. Not in the theatrical sense, in the real sense, the kind that begins inside your own mind. You need that kind of command presence because AI-driven battlefield surveillance is a brutal teacher. It teaches that anything repeated can be modeled, anything exposed can be tracked. Anything tracked can be anticipated. Anything anticipated can be controlled, disrupted, or destroyed. So what do serious people do with that lesson? They stop moving carelessly. They stop assuming invisibility. They stop trusting routine just because routine feels stable. They stop confusing familiarity with safety. You stop being predictable. You stop leaking patterns. You stop treating awareness like an accessory. And then you redirect. You study systems, not just surfaces. You study patterns, not just events. You ask where the data comes from, how it is interpreted, where the blind spots are, what assumptions are hidden inside the model, what human weaknesses still remain in the loop. You develop respect for persistence. You develop respect for concealment. You develop respect for timing. You train yourself to notice what repeats. You train yourself to notice what changes. You train yourself to ask better questions under pressure. Do this. Stop romanticizing brute force. Start respecting perception. Do this. Stop drowning in headlines. Start extracting principles. Do this. Stop assuming more tech means more control. Start asking whether the user is worthy of the tool. Do this. Stop living in readable patterns. Start building strategic variation, discipline, and restraint. Do this. Stop craving certainty before action. Start building competence under uncertainty. That sequence matters, because weak people want conclusions without discipline. They want to skip the part where they become someone capable of handling what they know. They want the shortcut. They want the summary. They want the aesthetic of intelligence without the burden of rigor. But war does not reward that, and neither does life. The use of AI-driven drones in battlefield surveillance is a warning to anyone still living lazily. It says the age of sloppy movement is ending. It says the environment is becoming more legible. It says your patterns matter more than your intentions. It says the world is increasingly shaped by who can turn observation into structured action before everyone else catches up. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is not your enemy. Delusion is. A lot of people spend their lives trying to avoid feeling exposed. They don't want to know what in them is predictable, manipulable, weak, repetitive, obvious. But exposure is a gift if you're strong enough to use it. Because once a weakness is visible, it can be trained. Once a pattern is known, it can be broken. Once a blind spot is named, it can be covered. What destroys men is not exposure. It is denial after exposure. That's called voluntary weakness. And voluntary weakness is everywhere. In institutions, in leaders, in ordinary people. In men who keep repeating failures and calling it bad luck. In organizations that keep getting surprised by the same category of threat because they love narratives more than audits. In cultures that prize expression over discipline and then act shocked when a more systematic actor outmaneuvers them. You do not need to become colder. You need to become clearer. You do not need to become robotic. You need to become less careless. You do not need to fear the machine. You need to fear what happens when weak minds use powerful systems without character. That is always the real risk. So bring this back to yourself. What in your life is operating on lazy pattern? What are you broadcasting without realizing it? Where are you moving on autopilot? Where have you become easy to predict? Where are you confusing motion with strategy? Where are you gathering information without converting it into improved behavior? Those are not abstract questions. Those are battlefield questions translated into personal responsibility. And do not hide behind scale. Do not say, this is geopolitics. This has nothing to do with me. That is avoidance dressed as sophistication. Everything has to do with you when the underlying principle governs power, clarity, discipline, and adaptation. The battlefield just shows the consequences faster. The side that sees better does not always win immediately, but it forces everyone else to pay a tax on their blindness. Read that again in your bones. Blindness has a tax. Delay, confusion, wasted effort, emotional overreaction, avoidable loss, and people keep paying it because fantasy feels better than calibration. Not you. Not if you are serious. If you are serious, you become the kind of person who wants to know where your blind spots are. You become the kind of person who values feedback more than ego. You become the kind of person who would rather be corrected than comforted. You become the kind of person who can take a hard truth without collapsing into self-pity. That is masculine self-respect at its healthiest. Not dominance theater. Not performative invulnerability. Honest calibration. Stable standards. Directed force. You know what the weak man does? He hears all this and turns it into posture. He wants to sound strategic. He wants to borrow the language. He wants to repeat concepts like situational awareness and decision superiority while still living with terrible habits, fragile emotions, and no command over his attention. That is fake competence. That is vocabulary without embodiment. The strong man is different. He takes the principle and he lives it. He sharpens his perception. He guards his focus. He reduces noise. He notices patterns. He changes bad routines before they become destiny. He respects technology without kneeling to it. He knows that tools matter, but the soul using the tool matters more. Because eventually, every system reaches the limit of the operator's character. That's the line. So, if you want the final reframe, here it is. AI-driven drones in battlefield surveillance are not just about military modernization. They are about the rising price of being unaware. They are about a world where persistent perception is becoming a decisive asset, where hidden patterns are easier to expose, where prediction grows more valuable, and where sloppy movement becomes increasingly dangerous. The lesson is not to panic. The lesson is to mature. Mature in how you think. Mature in how you observe. Mature in how you move. Mature in what you repeat. Mature in what you tolerate from yourself. Because once you understand that power belongs more and more to those who can perceive accurately and act coherently, your life has to change. You stop celebrating noise. You stop confusing aggression with control. You stop mistaking busyness for progress. You stop admiring confidence that cannot withstand scrutiny. You become quieter, stronger, more exact. You stop chasing the feeling of power and start building the habits that produce it. That is self-reclamation. And that is why this subject matters even if you never wear a uniform, never fly a drone, never enter a command center. The principle is universal. What is watched can be interpreted. What is interpreted can be acted upon. What is repeated can be predicted. So reclaim your patterns. Reclaim your attention. Reclaim your standards. Reclaim your discipline before the world does the reading for you and hands you the consequences. Do not wait for humiliation to teach you structure. Do not wait for failure to teach you awareness. Do not wait for pressure to teach you who you should have been training to become. Train now, see now, tighten now, redirect now. You are not here to drift through a world becoming sharper while you remain soft. You are not here to be readable by chaos, manipulated by noise, and defeated by your own lack of discipline. You are here to become a man whose presence is difficult to exploit, a person whose mind does not fragment under complexity. A person who can face uncomfortable truths and grow more coherent, not less. A person who understands that technology changes the arena, but character still determines who can stand in it without losing himself. That is your identity reset. You are not just the watcher. You are not just the target. You are not just the consumer of information. You are the filter. You are the discipline. You are the standard. You are the answer. Subscribe if you want more truth like this, more clarity that forces you to think straighter, more reminders that real strength begins with accurate perception and disciplined action. And stay with this community if you are done with soft lies, done with shallow commentary, and ready to become one of the people who would rather face reality and get stronger than hide from it and stay easy to defeat.